Welcome to Kern Airmanship Model in Detail. This evening we're going to look at situational awareness. I'm Captain Dave Cook. I'm going to be your presenter for this evening. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Airmanship Excellence, and this is Session 10 in the 11 webinar series. I see we have some folks on the crew roster this evening who have not been with us before on one of these webinars, so let me give you a quick checkout on your control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You can see at the top you have a white arrow and an orange rectangle. If you click on that arrow, you will collapse your control panel, and if you click on it again, it will expand it. You can text message comments and questions by typing them in here and hitting send. However, I'd prefer, if you don't mind, if you have a question or comment, raise your hand by clicking on this icon, and that appears in my control panel. However, bear with me a little bit this evening because we have a pretty long roster here, and I can only see 5 people at a time, so I have to scroll up and down. So, but just as a test here, will everyone please raise their hand? Okay, I'm going to put your hands down, so now if you have a question or comment, just go ahead and raise it. This is a FAA safety team wings program, part of the pilot proficiency program, so you do get 1 knowledge credit for attending the webinar. The other webinar sponsor is the Center for Airmanship Excellence. As I mentioned, I'm the Executive Director. There are about 13 of us now, volunteers, who are working on programs and resources and ways that we can all pursue airmanship excellence in a way that is enjoyable and effective. This is the Center's website at airmanshipexcellence.org. A lot of resources for anybody here that's pursuing airmanship excellence. You can find out about the center, who's behind it, and so forth. You can also register on the website for airmanship updates. They're free, and they'll keep you in the loop on airmanship developments, airmanship excellence events, and so forth. Also available through the airmanship resources on the website, we have archives where you can download, request downloads for most of these webinars. This is the current series, Kern Airmanship Model in Detail, and all of the prior 9 webinars are available for download. This one will be put up on the website here in the next couple of days. And if you have not attended, if you had not viewed any of the prior webinars in the Kern Airmanship Model in Detail series, I'd suggest you download them and look at them because we're only looking at one of the 10 elements in the Kern Airmanship Model tonight, situational awareness. And even better, if you start getting real interested in pursuing airmanship excellence, the prior webinar series, Redefining Airmanship, 6 webinars, about 2 hours each, I'm sorry, about 1 hour each, a little bit more than 1 hour and a couple of them, that take a little broader look, give you a little better base for the whole airmanship approach to flying, and so I'd recommend you go through those too. And if you want to fly within an environment that the kind of environment we talk about in these webinars, an airmanship development support organization, then you might want to download this particular briefing. It's video, and get a good thorough briefing on what we're looking at doing with standing up an airmanship development support organization demonstrator here in the Chicago area. Well, here's the overview of the whole Kern Airmanship Model in Detail webinar series. In Session 1, we took a little broader view of the model. We had an overview perspective on the whole model. Then in Session 2, we started drilling down in each one of the 10 elements in the model. So we looked at flight discipline, 3 was skill, for proficiency. And of course, those three are the three bedrock principles of the Kern Airmanship model. And then we, in session 5, looked at knowledge of self, then knowledge of aircraft, knowledge of team, knowledge of environment, and in 9, we looked at knowledge of risk. And those, of course, are the 5 pillars of knowledge in the Kern Airmanship model. And then tonight, session 10, we're looking at situational awareness. And next week, we'll look at judgment. And of course, those are the 2 capstone outcomes in the Kern Airmanship model. And the overarching question that I think we should all be asking ourselves about our flying is, if I don't fly right, should I fly at all? This webinar series is based on the book Redefining Airmanship, written by Colonel/Dr. Tony Kern. Colonel Kern spent most of his career in the Air Force in the training command. He has a PhD in education. Very credentialed guy, very experienced guy in training, in the training world. And he, in fact, has written 4 other books, so 5 books altogether on airmanship. I consider Kern to be the expert on airmanship, and he's provided us in this book, Redefining Airmanship, with not only the Kern Airmanship model, but with a framework, a way to go about pursuing airmanship excellence. And that's what these webinar series are all about. The book was published in 1997, but it's still available. Now, we've always, those of us who have worked together in these webinars before have found it very beneficial to have a shared definition of airmanship, because if I ask you folks who have not attended any of these before what you think airmanship is, we'd get probably some pretty vague answers, some differing answers, and that's because even though the term airmanship has been around forever, it really isn't a defined term. There's not a standard definition in any FAA manuals or any other books that I know about. So Kern came up with a definition, and of course it dovetails with the model and so forth. So this is the shared definition of airmanship that we've been using, and we look at it from the point of view of what is an expert airman. An expert airman, our expert airmen possess discipline, skill, and proficiency. Expert airmen have a thorough understanding of themselves, their aircraft, the team they operate with, their environment, and the risks they face. And expert airmen consistently display exceptional situational awareness and use good judgment at all times. Key words: consistently, exceptional, and good judgment at all times. So that's what we're striving for. So that's our shared definition of airmanship. I hope that you can at least buy into that for the discussion we're going to have here this evening about situational awareness. Here's a quick run-through on the Kern Airmanship model for you new folks, and also as a quick review for those of you who have been attending. We look at the Kern Airmanship model as being the scaffold upon which we build our airmanship skills and capabilities. So we use this model. It isn't just an academic exercise or a thought experiment where we look at how Kern organized airmanship elements. We use it. It's a tool. We use it in a lot of different ways, but this is the most important thing that we use it for is as a scaffold, so that as we build our skills and capabilities, we can arrange them in that scaffold in a way that enhances our overall airmanship package. Now, in the Kern Airmanship model, there are 3 bedrock principles: flight discipline, skill, and proficiency. And upon those 3 bedrock principles rest the 5 pillars of knowledge: knowledge of self, knowledge of aircraft, knowledge of team, knowledge of environment, and knowledge of risk. And upon those 5 pillars of knowledge sit the capstone outcomes of situational awareness and judgment. And of course, judgment is the key. 70 to 90%, depending whose statistics you want to believe, of all accidents are caused by pilot error. We don't want to make errors. How does that happen? Well, we all know that accidents result from an error chain, and there are links in that chain, and judgment usually plays a big part. in that error chain. And in fact, if you look at most of the accidents over in our personal flying segment of the general aviation, I think you'll agree with me that most of those accidents are caused by faulty go decisions. In other words, the pilot should have made a no-go decision, and if they had not conducted the flight in the environment and so on with the situation at the time, the accident wouldn't have happened. So judgment is what we're striving for. Judgment is the final frontier in piloting. That's where the accidents are being caused by poor judgment. So that's why the Kern Airmanship model, all the elements lead to good judgment. Let me say that, talk about that model again in just a little different way one more time. If we practice the bedrock principles of flight discipline, skill, and proficiency, while always striving for more perfect knowledge of ourselves, the airplane we're flying, our team, the environment we're flying in, and the risks we face, then we can expect the capstone outcomes of ever-improving situational awareness and judgment. Well, let's take a look now at situational awareness. Let's drill down on that element. And first of all, I have a question for you before we get in there, kind of a pre-webinar set a question for you. I'm sorry, I have to pay attention. I say that's a cockpit distraction. I should pay attention to what I'm doing, because to launch these poll questions, I have to hit several buttons. So here we go. First question: how would you rate your level of situational awareness now? Okay, just about everyone's voted. Give it just a little more time. Okay, it looks like everybody who's going to vote has voted, so I'll close it and I'll share it with you. And 40% rate your situational awareness right now as exceptional. 33% good enough to keep me safe. 20% sometimes I have lapses, and 7% I frequently feel that I have lost SA. Good. Well, that's an interesting spread. And again, I would caution those who think your situational awareness is exceptional, that the data has shown that we are all very poor at self-assessment of our skills. All right, let's move on. Now here's just to kind of put situational awareness in perspective, throw in a little bit of war story. An F-111 weapons system officer during Desert Storm was heard over the radio saying, "Are they shooting at us?" So situational awareness kind of at the leading edge there, the ragged edge. Kern says about situational awareness: situational awareness is the filter through which every aviator's action must be viewed. Here's a personal view from Major John Houston, who is a World War II B-17 pilot. Teamwork is an essential part of good situational awareness. Good situational awareness is essential to success in aviation. Although we have made a quantum leap forward in many areas of science and technology, the need for good situational awareness remains constant. So there's a very experienced flyer. Learned a lot of this obviously back in World War II, and went through the Air Force program, retired as a general, and he's an advocate of being cognizant of and having good situational awareness. Now, Kern also uses a statement in his book that I find useful for me in thinking about situational awareness. Situational awareness is the feeder fix for judgment. You know, I do a lot of instrument flight training. I used to do a lot of instrument flying, and the feeder fix concept, I don't know why, has always seemed like a good idea to me, because it takes a lot of ATC back and forth out of the arrival if there's a feeder fix that then leads into a feeder route. But if you think of situational awareness, as Kern has it in the model, that everything, all of the other elements, the 5 pillars of knowledge and the 3 capstone, the 3 bedrock principles flow through situational awareness to get you to that judgment. So it is the feeder fix. Good way to think about it. Now, with situational awareness, a pilot can construct an accurate mental model of reality. With SA, a pilot can project potential courses of action against likely future scenarios. And with SA, a pilot can fly efficiently, taking advantage of opportunities and avoiding pitfalls. Without SA, we misperceive important cues or proceed blindly into the unknown. And that's not something we want to do in an airplane, proceed blindly into the unknown. Situational awareness is an extremely complex and involved phenomenon. There are many different academic definitions for it. There are 5 essential questions that we want to address regarding SA. Now, I have a question for you. Think that cat has a good SA right now? All right, the first question is, what is SA? How important is it? Number 3, how do we recognize loss of situational awareness? 4, what should we do if we lose SA? And 5, what can we do to improve SA? We're going to talk about each one of these 5 important questions here. First of all, what is SA? SA is the accurate perception of what is going on both now and in the near future. When perception matches reality, and you are able to act on it in a timely and rational manner, you have SA. So you've got to not only know what's going on and be able to project it into the future, you've got to do it in a timely manner, because most of the things that confront us in flight that are going to get us have a short fuse on them. And we have to be rational. We have to be realistic. We have to accept the situation for what it really is, not what we wish it might be, and act on that in a rational manner. Situational awareness is the accurate perception of what is going on both now and in the near future. And this is the Venn diagram that the FAA uses, and I think it's a pretty good way to picture, at least it works for me in my mind. If we want SA, we have to be aware of what has happened, what is happening right now, and what might happen. If we can keep all of those in balance, we have SA, and that's where we want to be, right in that sweet spot. Okay, here's a little question for you. Can you spot the loss of SA in this picture? Give you a minute to look at it. All right, anybody think that they can see the loss of SA? Raise your hand, please. This is an SA test. Okay, oh, there's a hand. I'm going to open up Jim DeMaria. You opened up your mic. Do you know what the loss SA is there? Jim, do you read me? Okay, I'm not getting Jim at all. I'm going to mute the mic. Sorry, Jim. I'll give you guys a hint. It's a Navy-U.S. Air Force game. Don't see any other hands, so nobody else is. Well, here's one. Here's Ken. Ken, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great, loud and clear. So what do you think the loss of SA is in this picture, Ken?
I'm guessing that these 3 people don't know that they have those letters taped to their backs.
Close, but they know they have them there. So thank you though, Ken. That's a good guess on it. Hang on. It's the fact that they are standing without the midshipmen with the O and the N and the V. So that's their loss of SA here is that they should have been aware a camera was taking that picture without those 3 of their crewmates there being in there with them. So that's an example of lost situational awareness. It's critical to understand the role of time in the SA equation. Pilots understand the need to stay ahead of the airplane. We've been taught that from day one in our flight training. But the aspect of situational awareness includes staying ahead of the airplane, but also when you perceive something and then formulate a plan, you have to act on it quickly too. To stay ahead of the airplane, an aviator has to be able to accurately perceive the elements of a current situation, comprehend their meaning, and project their implications on likely future scenarios. Now, there are 3 levels of situational awareness. Level 1 is the be able to perceive a relevant cue, like a warning light comes on. Level 2 is able to put an observed event into the big picture. And level 3 is able to see the implications of the event on future courses of action. So let's take a little closer look at level 1 situational awareness. Able to perceive a relevant cue. Even at this most basic level of SA, many variables can cause a breakdown in the SA process. Some of those variables are controllable. Others are not. Level 1 SA errors are called input errors. Still on level 1 SA, input errors include incorrect data, misinterpreted information. Still on level 1. The enemies of level 1 SA are channelized attention. We've got to keep moving our attention around the cockpit, even with the glass cockpits that help us to do that because it isn't spread all over and easier to assimilate, but you have to keep moving that attention around. If it gets channelized, that's a cue that things aren't going well, and you won't be able to perceive other cues. Distraction is an enemy of level 1 SA. Task saturation is an enemy of level 1 SA. Obviously, when we get too busy, get saturated, that's the time we're going to miss an important warning light or indication someplace. Now, level 2 SA, that means we're able to put an observed event into the big picture. It attaches meaning and significance to the observation. The ability to attach the appropriate significance to an event is crucial to success in flying. It is dependent on airmanship pillar of knowledge, of self-knowledge, airmanship pillar of aircraft knowledge, airmanship pillar of environmental knowledge. So now you can see how those other elements of the Kern Airmanship model are starting to feed into situational awareness. Still with level 2 SA, putting the event into the big picture. This level of SA requires an holistic interpretation of events. Got to have that big picture, got to see it all. Many new flyers have difficulty developing SA at this level or beyond because they lack a framework of experiential patterns. New aviators can build this framework by experience, and this is Kern's New Aviators, but this is true. We can continue to build our experiential framework by experience, of course. We can use simulation to do it. We can hangar fly, find out what other guys are saying and doing. An aviator crosstalk reading or formal sessions or of course reading accident reports, reading articles, all of those kinds of things are ways that we can build this framework. So let me ask you a question. How do you develop your situational awareness framework now? And you can select any that apply and all that apply there, please. Okay, I'll give it just a little longer. Okay, looks like everybody who is going to vote has voted. I'll close it, share it with you. And looks like 87% use experience, another 80% use simulation. That's great. If you've attended these webinars before, you know I'm a big fan of simulation. 60% use hangar flying and 93% use reading. Good, and that's a nice mix. I hope that none of you just use one of those, and that's the way to do it. All right, hide this. All right, let's now look at level 3 situational awareness. And when I have these little gaps in attention, I apologize, but I'm scanning the roster here to see if anybody has questions. All right, level 3, able to see the implications of the event on future courses of action. In-flight anticipatory capability, that's level 3 SA. After accurately perceiving and assimilating an indication or event into the current situation, you must look into the future to see the implications of the event on future courses of action. And this is, I like this as a way to think about it. You're actually looking into the future, staying ahead of that airplane. What's going to be happening? What kind of environment will I be in a half hour? You know, what kind of mode of flight will I be in? You know, what are the risks at that time? All of these things, you have to see into that future to be able to do this right. Still with level 3? This is often difficult for many aviators because it requires innovation, changing the existing plan, and those are two things that all human beings don't like to do with it. There's resistance to it. So, but you have to be open to innovation and changing the existing plan for this to work. Still with level 3, situational awareness is useless if it cannot be converted into action. That often requires a pilot to modify courses of action. Do this by looking at the new reality in terms of what it means to the remainder of the flight. So you're constantly renewing that reality that you're operating in. So here's a little scenario, kind of bring this into focus for us about the 3 levels of SA. Single pilot operation, single engine operation, flying over mountainous terrain, low oil pressure indication. The pilot notes the low oil pressure indication. This is level 1 SA. He recognized the cue. His knowledge of his location, his knowledge of the engine's oil requirements, attach importance to the indication. So if he didn't know what that indication was all about, he'd just think, oh, so what? What is that? I didn't know where that needle's supposed to be. So he has to have knowledge of the system. And having knowledge of his location being over the mountains, that's going to attach a different kind of importance than if he's flying over flat country and maybe over an airport. So that attaching that importance to the indication is part of it, a big part of it, and this is now you're at level 2 situational awareness. The pilot projects the cue into multiple futures. Okay, what if I do this? What if I do that? I got that oil pressure. What if I keep going? What if I look for an open field down there and hopefully find one and land? Projects into the futures. The pilot quickly decides, quickly decides the best course of action. This is level 3 SA. Of course, this is what we have to get to. This scenario also demonstrates how SA influences judgment, because once he's got all this, then he's going to make that decision on what he's going to do. Okay, another way to look at SA is, a lot of us will say, well, I can't define SA for you, but I know it when I see it. Well, here's what 173 F-15 drivers said about what SA is. Build a composite picture of the entire situation in 3 dimensions. Assimilate information from multiple sources. Know spatial position and geometric relationships. Periodically update the current dynamic situation. Prioritize information and actions. Make quality and timely decisions. Project the current situation into the future. So that's how they look at the process of SA. Well, here's question number 2, though, the 5 essential questions about SA. How important is SA? Case studies and accident analyses from all areas of aviation tell us that SA is essential. In an analysis of all U.S. Air Force mishaps from 1989 through 1995, lost SA was the single largest contributing factor. All. Another Air Force study of air-to-air combat kills estimated that 90% of all aircraft that were shot down never even saw their attacker. So they lost their SA, and it came up to literally bite them in the tail. All right, have another question for you now. How important do you think SA is to your type of flying, the kind of flying you're doing right now? Okay, looks like everybody's voted. I'm going to close the polls. Share the results. Well, everybody says very important. Very good. Very good. All right. How do we recognize loss of SA, which is the third essential question? Well, if we detect ambiguity or confusion, if we start fixating on instruments or something on the ground or a thought, reduce frequency of or poor communication, if we start missing calls or if we can't do the readback, can't remember the frequency we're supposed to change to. That's an indicator that we're losing SA. So these are all cues to indicate that we're losing SA. Failure to meet targets. We're not doing things when we're supposed to. We're way behind in our flight plan, and we're sitting there wondering why we haven't thought about. We don't already know why. We're just kind of dreaming about why. Reduce maneuvering. This really, you can see this in instrument flying when the flying gets sloppier because the pilot is taking more and more time between control inputs. And maybe not trying to stay on track as tightly as you normally would. Those would be cues that you're experiencing some reduced maneuvering. You're probably starting to lose SA. Obviously, failure to stay ahead of the airplane. If it's like in your car when you're driving to work and all of a sudden you're 2 miles down the road and you wake up and say, how did I get here? We can't have that in the airplane, right? We've got to stay ahead of that airplane all the time. Shouldn't be doing it in the car either, really, right? Use of an undocumented procedure. There have been many, many, many accidents where the accident investigators show that one of the critical links in the air chain was the use of an undocumented procedure. So if you find yourself doing it, that's a cue. That's a red warning light that you're losing SA. Violation of a limitation or minimum, same thing. So those are your cues. Now, good news is you can learn how to remember these cues. You can practice recognizing the cues and then following through the process of using those cues to regain SA. But we have to have these cues. We have to know what they are, because the first step in maintaining SA is recognizing when we start to lose it. So, loss of SA can occur gradually or all at once, and it can happen that way. I don't know if you've ever experienced it. I, of course, have over the years. Sometimes it just comes on very, very gradually, and all of a sudden it's like I mentioned earlier. You wake up and say, wow, I'm 30 miles past that last waypoint. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. So this happens. We have to guard against it. Lost SA seriously degrades the ability to achieve flight objectives and is often the prime factor in accidents. There are nearly always sufficient cues available for recognition and recovery from lost situational awareness. So that's the good news. Even though it's the biggest factor in accidents, we can learn how not to lose SA or how to regain it recognize it if we do, and how to regain it rapidly. So that's the essential question number 4. What should you do if you lose SA? First thing, get away from the dirt. Other than hitting another airplane, about the only thing that can kill us in an airplane is hitting the dirt. So the first thing, if you recognize one of these cues and you're starting to lose SA, make sure you got a lot of room between you and the dirt. That's the first step, first golden rule there. Number 2, stabilize the aircraft. And hopefully you've been hearing this since your first hour of flight instruction. Always fly the aircraft first. If you're in an emergency situation, fly the aircraft first. So stabilize the aircraft. Then buy some time. Whatever you need to do, buy some time. So that you know, if the gear didn't come down and you're feeling like you're losing SA because you can't remember what the memory items are on your checklist, and you're a little confused on what you're supposed to do next, best thing you can do is buy some time. Well, of course, that presupposes that you did really good pre-flight planning and you had plenty of fuel on board, but when possible, buy time. Then seek all the information you can get about what's going on around you. You got to fill up that pipeline again into that feeder fix, into situational awareness. You got to get information. So you need knowledge of all of those 5 pillars of knowledge as it relates to that situation right at the time. Then evaluate that information. Then you will regain SA. So that's the process. Again, you can learn it, you can practice it, you can train for it. And of course, one of the biggest parts of this process is learn from that experience. Don't just let it go by you. Go back and when you critique your flight, like you should always do, you should think about why you lost SA, how you got it back, how long it took you, all those things. So learn from the experience. Well, and the 5th essential question about SA is, what can we do to improve SA? Because we want it to get better all the time. We can use technology. That's going to help us with situational awareness, you know, with moving maps, GPS, heads-up displays, all the things we have right now. We can use them in our everyday flying to help us. That improves SA. We can define roles, and this primarily addresses multi-crew aircraft, because it's a very important issue in multi-crew aircraft. But you know, really, in effect, you define your role, and you're going to have to do everything. So you have to define what that role is, and that means, well, how do you play that role? What are the elements of that role? You have to manage distractions. We all know that cockpit distractions are a killer. We have to avoid them. We have to protect ourselves from them, and there are techniques. But when they happen, we've got to manage them quickly. And in fact, you know, in the case of probably the best known distraction management tool we have, called the sterile cockpit, that's managing the distractions that can happen very easily if we're talking especially about non-flight essential things below 10,000 feet or below cruise altitude, whatever we think, or whatever our operation specifies as the sterile cockpit zone. And of course, we can improve our SA by reducing overload. Now remember, overload has 2 components. It has the task at hand, the task requirements, and the pilot capabilities. So you can reduce overload, or the potential overload, by increasing your pilot capabilities, moving this curve up. You can also reduce task requirements, reduce the load by managing them effectively, you know, planning ahead, getting the ground control frequency in when you go to tower frequency on #1 comm, so that you're ready to just flip it over to get out when you clear the runway, so that you don't have to retune when you're trying to turn off the runway. A lot of ways that we know about that we can manage it, but also we can use that automation to reduce that workload too. So reduce overload is a way to improve our situational awareness, because we have more processing capability in our Mark II brain here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a Mark I brain, that soon to be Mark II. We have more capacity, more capability. And of course, a big one is avoiding complacency. I just viewed a FAA produced DVD today that's going to be used in the Fast Team Safety Stand Down this coming Saturday, which for those of you who are viewing this as a recording, that's on April 9th. And it's FAA Safety Stand Down, and I'm going to be moderating the section on positive attitude, which is really all about airmanship. And they really hit heavily this idea of complacency causes your airmanship to go down the tubes. And that's really true, because the flip side of that is flight discipline. If you have good flight discipline, your airmanship will move towards the excellence reading. So you have to avoid complacency. That's how you improve your essay. Also, test all your assumptions. I like to use the term that Ronnie Reagan used to use, trust but verify. When you make an assumption, well, I have enough fuel to get there. That's an assumption until you test it, till you work it out, calculate it, all of that sort of thing. And intervene. Don't just sit there. Once you see something's wrong, get that, make sure that essay is working right, and make your decisions, and then do something. Well, here's what Kern has to say, some quotes right out of Redefining Airmanship. That's what he has to say about situational awareness. SA feeds aviator decision-making and judgment. SA cannot be viewed in isolation. All foundations and pillars of airmanship can support or detract from SA. SA can and should be improved by individual effort. SA is not an innate quality, but rather a higher echelon piece of the airmanship whole. We can improve SA to whatever degree we have the will and discipline to achieve. So let me ask you another question. Do you think it is possible to continuously improve your situational awareness? Okay, looks like everybody's voted. Close it, share it with you, and very good. 100% say yes. I'm glad to see that you share my viewpoint on that and Kern's viewpoint. All right, let's take a look at a case study. Again, trying to bring all this that we've talked about into a little better focus for you. This accident occurred in January 1, 1989. It was a Cessna 210D. A pilot, 3 passengers on board, departed Fort Myers in the morning, about 9:30 in the morning. I don't know if they got around to Gulf Inn or not. Heading back up to Chicago. They're going to land at Lansing. And, dead of winter, so they were coming from the warm to the cold. The pilot was not instrument rated, so he was operating pretty far afield, in my opinion, for a non-instrument rated pilot. But he did have 2,500 hours of total time, which again is a little unusual for a guy to have that much time probably in the personal flying sector, and still not have an instrument rating and fly in an airplane like that. I think we'd all agree that the record has shown that's a recipe for getting yourself in trouble. But in this case, the first leg from Fort Myers to Tullahoma, Tennessee went uneventfully. They refueled at Tullahoma, but the pilot did not obtain a weather update. So he's flying partway back, about halfway roughly back to Lansing. And, that's like an all-day flight in that 210, or pretty much. And he only got his weather briefing before he left Fort Myers, never updated. He departed Tullahoma VFR en route to Lansing. Now, shortly after takeoff from Tullahoma, they encountered deteriorating weather. The pilot decided to land at Vermilion County Airport, which is Danville, Illinois. Unknown to the pilot, the weather had deteriorated drastically. The weather at Danville, or at Vermilion County, was ceiling indefinite, obscured, visibility a quarter mile in fog. So below even Cat 1 ILS minimums. Non-instrument rated pilot. A pilot without an instrument rating was attempting a very difficult approach. That's a difficult approach even for an experienced instrument pilot, especially if he's flying it without a flight director or a coupled autopilot. So this guy probably was not using a flight director or a coupled autopilot, who knows, but he wasn't good at using the autopilot, wasn't proficient obviously because it didn't work, because the aircraft crashed into trees that were only 35 feet AGL, 5 miles north of the airport. The ILS runs down to the south-southwest there. So he was maneuvering for the ILS. But 5 miles north he was down. So he was probably trying, he scud running, he was probably trying to stay down below the clouds, and it just ran out of ceiling and visibility. The pilot and 1 passenger were killed. 2 passengers were seriously injured. No evidence of an aircraft malfunction. So the NTSB said the cause was continued flight by a non-instrument rated pilot into IMC. And we all know that one. You're going to be some vulture's lunch if you try that very often. Sometimes you don't even get away with it once. Not a good idea. Also, the NTSB said a cause was the pilot's failure to maintain sufficient altitude, obviously. So, I have a question for you about this case study. How would you rate this pilot's overall situational awareness? Woefully deficient? Typical of a pilot of his experience? About like yours? It should have been sufficient for a safe flight. Situational awareness we're talking about. Okay, it looks like everybody's voted. I'll close it and share it with you. So 93% woefully, and 7% thinks it should have been sufficient for a safe flight. Interesting. Okay, I will hide that. The Kern Airmanship model suggests the pilot lost SA. I think that's pretty obvious. The SA loss came from multiple failures. Flight into IMC, failure of flight discipline. He broke the regs. He knew he shouldn't be doing that. He knew he wasn't qualified. He knew he wasn't proficient. He broke flight discipline and kept going. Failure to update weather. That constituted lack of knowledge of the environment, one of the pillars of knowledge, environment. Failure to recognize limitations. Lack of knowledge of self. He thought he was better than he was. He thought that for some reason he could fly in those clouds. He could sneak into that airport. Probably had been doing scud running and stuff like this for a long time, because you know how that goes. You get away with it, and then for one time, then you think you can do it, and you get away with it again, and keep doing it, but it catches up with you eventually. And loss of SA led to flawed decisions, which is poor judgment. So that's how we can use the Kern Airmanship model to look at an accident and analyze it from an airmanship perspective. So here are the takeaways from this webinar this evening. Situational awareness is the filter through which every aviator's action must be viewed. Good situational awareness is essential to success in aviation. With SA, a pilot can fly efficiently, taking advantage of opportunities and avoiding pitfalls. Without SA, we misperceive important cues or proceed blindly into the unknown. SA techniques and procedures can be learned. The 3 bedrock principles and 5 pillars of knowledge feed into situational awareness. Again, I'd recommend that you get a hold of Redefining Airmanship and read the book. Even though we're drilling down fairly deep into each chapter in this series, we're still not getting everything out of the chapter. Just as there's not enough time, to get them all into the webinar. So there is more very interesting information in the book about situational awareness, and there are several more case studies in the book that, again, just don't fit in time-wise to the webinar format that further elucidate this concept of situational awareness. So I'd highly recommend you read the book. And don't forget to register for the final session, session 11, judgment. The way this system is set up, go to webinar system, you have to register for each webinar individually. You received your email from the SPANS announcement from the FAA about a week ago for session 11. So you have to dig into your email file and go to the link there. Or if you can't find it, send an email to me and I'll send it to you. So before we get to the contact information, let me give everybody a chance to ask a question here or make a comment. If you feel like that, raise your hand, please. And we've got a couple minutes to talk about things if you'd care to do that. Any confusion on the points we talked about tonight? Any experiences you've had you'd like to share that point up what lost situational awareness is like or what it can do for you? You do too, you're more likely. Okay, see nobody else wants to share tonight, so we'll move on. Here's my contact information. Feel free to call me if you do have any questions, comments, want to talk about it. I really appreciate your feedback to make these webinars better. We're planning another series of webinars on airmanship right now that'll kick in after this series is complete next week, because we want to keep providing you with good information on airmanship development and airmanship excellence. Here's my email address if you want to send me an email. Of course, recommend you go to the website, register for airmanship updates, look at the archives, and I'd also invite you to visit my blog, Captain Dave's Hangar. You can get there via the website, or if you just ask the Google, he'll tell you how to get there. And I have one final question for you this evening before we break up. And I can tell the number of people, the number of hits on the website for the Center for Airmanship Excellence, but I'm curious to see how many of those, how many of you who attend these webinars are going to the website. This is just for my curiosity. I appreciate the feedback. Okay, looks like everybody has voted. I'll close it. And just out of curiosity, if you are, I'll share it with you. About a third have. About half haven't yet, but they're going to go do it, and about 14% say no, they haven't and they don't plan to. Well, great. Well, thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. And I'll leave you with this thought from General Chuck Yeager. If you're going to fly, do it right.